I turned 40 in a house that had rearranged itself around my absence. The coffee maker sat clean and hopeful, a row of strawberries slept in their carton like tiny hearts on ice, and there was a smear of sunlight across the dining table, where last night my husband had promised a breakfast that would blow my mind. I called his name into the quiet, and heard it fall back to me with the politeness of a stranger. The kids' rooms were museum-still beds, smoothed with a care they never gave on school mornings, closets thinned of the sweaters I washed and folded, in an order only I understood. My first thought was that I had dreamed my life and awakened in its replica. My second was that something unspeakable had happened. My third, when I found the missing toothbrushes and the emptied luggage space, was that the unspeakable had been done on purpose. I am Michaela, 40, mother of two, a woman who shelved a law career 17 years ago to build a home with a man who said he loved how my mind lit a room. We met over case notes and cheap takeout, and when we spoke of the future, it sounded like a duet. He became a rising star at Sullivan and Pierce Investment Group. I became the orbit that kept his days neat and gravity-bound. The necklace he gave me on our anniversary last month still rested in its velvet throat, gleaming like a promise that had learned to lie. My phone buzzed with birthday wishes from people who had known me before I was wife and mother, law school friends, who remembered the way I could dismantle an argument with one precise question, my parents, with their warm messages, full of recipes and pride. From my husband, nothing. From my daughter, nothing. From my son, nothing. I texted, then called, then sat on the stair where the family photos marched down the wall, beaches, diplomas, holidays, each frame a sugar-glazed version of us. When the dread became too loud, I opened Instagram. My daughter posts everything: nail polish sunsets, the ghost of a fight with a friend. The newest story was a pool the color of impossible dreams and a city sketched in silver behind it. In the next frame stood my husband, my daughter, my son, smiling, lifted by luxury, the caption stamped beneath: "Daddy's treating us since mom's boring." The word boring broke me with ridiculous efficiency. My birthday, their vacation, Dubai, and me edited from the frame as cleanly as a smudge on glass. I have learned that grief can be both scream and scalpel. The scream wanted to hurl plates to drive to the airport to set the sky on fire. The scalpel wanted facts. I walked into his office with a steadiness I did not feel and unlocked the desk drawer with the key he thought I didn't know about. Credit card statements sang their sterile song. Restaurants on Thursdays he had called client dinners, a bracelet I never saw, hotel rooms in our own city that bloomed like bruises on the page. Beneath the paper, a burner phone blinked up at me with the plainness of a confession. The messages opened like traps. "Wear that red thing. Dubai will be amazing, she has no idea. The kids think it's special time with Dad. It is a strange thing to stand in your own home in your own body and feel your life tilt without moving a single muscle." My training woke up first. Before I was anybody's wife, I was very good at evidence. I thought of the cameras at Sullivan and Pierce, the vendor I had helped them choose 3 years back, the long retention window Marcus, head of security, had bragged about. It took one call, the kind of call a woman makes when she has spent years being reasonable and suddenly remembers she is also resourceful. I put gentleness in my voice and asked for footage that might help me make a surprise video, and I gave him dates that lined up with Thursdays and the shape of my husband's absence. When the secure link arrived, I closed the blinds and let daylight become a witness. There is a kind of shock that doesn't make a sound. I watched them on the office camera. My husband and the eager 20-something who laughed too hard at his jokes during holiday parties sitting close on the couch I'd once napped on during a charity gala. The kiss at 8:16. The bracelet slipped onto her wrist with a flourish I recognized. I watched them talk about my birthday as if it were a hurdle in their itinerary. Watched him say I was predictable, watched him make a joke about the way I liked to color code the calendar that held his life together. Each Thursday, unspooled hands laughter promises a careless future sketched on company time. I collected it all, not because I wanted the sad pornography of betrayal, but because the law adores a record. By the time the footage ended, my hands had stopped shaking. I had crossed the border from devastation into decision. I pulled the employee handbook he'd shoved in the drawer years ago and read the clause about executives and subordinates, the crisp language about conduct, the part about misusing company resources. I drafted an email to Richard Barnes, the managing partner, clean and spare, just the facts and the attachments. I did not mention the anniversary necklace, or the Instagram caption, or the way my son still leaned into me in public like a small boat to its shore. I waited until Tuesday, at 9:15 a.m., the weekly executive meeting he complained about, and I pressed send. At 9:52 a.m., his access was revoked. An automated email told me he had been unmade in the language he respects. My phone began to ring like an alarm someone else set. He called, then called again. He begged. He swore. He threatened. He said my name as if it were a rope. I turned on Do Not Disturb and began packing his trophies into boxes labeled with his favorite thing, his own name. Justice is not vengeance, though they sometimes wear the same shoes. On the day I turned 40, abandoned and suddenly bright with clarity, I made myself a gift, the end of pretending. And when my daughter finally texted Happy Birthday, Mom, 6 hours late and a continent away, I took a breath so deep it found the bottom of me, and I decided that when they returned, they would find a mother who had remembered her power. When they finally came back, the air in the house no longer belonged to them. I had stripped it of his scent. His suits boxed his colognes, dumped his trophies, lined up like relics in the garage awaiting removal. The walls still bore our photographs, but I had turned them face down like guests dismissed from a party. My children trailed in with their suntans and shopping bags, laughter sticky from sugar and novelty, and then froze when they saw the emptiness. My husband was last through the door, jaw-set sunglasses still on a man who had once carried entire rooms with his confidence now reduced to dragging a suitcase across a floor that no longer forgave him. "Where are my things?" he asked, though he already knew. My daughter glanced between us, the spark of Instagram bravado extinguished. My son clutched the stuffed camel they had bought at the airport, eyes wide with the knowledge children should never have that the ground beneath them is shifting. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the evidence at him like daggers. I led them into the living room where I had left the laptop open, the folder marked with dates. I pressed play. Silence held us as the footage rolled, his arm around the young woman, his careless kisses, his laughter when he called me predictable. My daughter gasped. My son's face pinched in confusion. My husband lunged for the laptop, but I shut it with a click that echoed louder than any fight we had ever had. "Enough," I said. My voice was flat, but beneath it was every sleepless night, every unanswered text, every piece of myself I had set aside for his career, for our family, for the illusion. "You left me on my birthday. You left me in this life long before that, and now you've left yourself." He stammered, cycling through apologies and excuses like a drowning man grasping at driftwood. "It didn't mean anything. She doesn't matter. I still love you." The words spilled out flimsy as paper in rain. But love does not humiliate. Love does not erase a woman from her own birthday and fly her children across the world to hide betrayal in sunlight. My daughter, trembling, whispered, "Dad, is this true?" He reached for her, but she stepped back. My son crawled into my lap, hiding his face against my chest. And in that moment, I felt something shift, the balance of power, the shape of our family, the story we would tell ourselves about who we were. The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, tears, slammed doors, and late-night whispers, with Emma, my sister, my anchor, who reminded me again and again, "You are not the one who broke this." Divorce papers materialized like storm clouds. He tried to negotiate to salvage his reputation, to twist guilt into leverage. But every clause in the handbook, every email I had documented, every video I had saved weighed against him. The company cut him loose. The woman he risked everything for evaporated the moment the scandal became public. And yet, even stripped of his job and his lover, he still tried to wear authority in our home. He called me bitter, vindictive, claimed I was poisoning the kids. But the truth was already seeping into them like ink. My daughter stopped posting glossy snapshots of her life. My son started asking why promises break, Children learn betrayal not through lectures, but through the tremor in their mother's hands and the hollow in their father's voice. One night, after a particularly brutal argument about custody, I found myself sitting on the kitchen floor, my back against the cabinet, sobbing into the silence. My daughter came in, quietly sat beside me, and whispered, "Mom, you don't have to be strong all the time." She leaned her head against my shoulder, and I realized the revenge. I thought I wanted the corporate takedown, the scandal, the public disgrace was not the point. The real victory was this moment, raw and unvarnished, where my child finally saw me not as the backdrop to her father's world, but as a woman who refused to disappear. When the court date came, I wore a simple black dress and no jewelry. He arrived in a suit that looked borrowed, his swagger deflated. My testimony was measured, the evidence irrefutable. The judge granted me primary custody, citing his reckless disregard for both marital vows and parental responsibility. He paled, his hands shaking, but I did not look away. For the first time in years, I saw him for what he truly was, not the architect of my life, but just a man who had gambled and lost. As we walked out of the courthouse, my daughter slipped her hand into mine. My son skipped ahead, humming to himself, free in a way children should be. And I thought, this is what justice looks like. Not fireworks or applause, just the quiet dignity of walking into a future unchained. The weeks after the court ruling were strangely quiet, as if the house itself exhaled after years of holding its breath. No more late-night pacing in the hallway, no more strained silences at the dinner table, no more pretending for the children's sake. I filled the walls with new photographs, me and the kids at the park, flour on our faces from baking. Laughter caught mid-air, rather than posed smiles that hid everything. The absence of his voice was not an emptiness, but a clearing, like weeds finally pulled from a garden that could now breathe. Still, healing is not a straight line. There were mornings I woke in panic, reaching instinctively for the space beside me in bed, only to find it cold. Nights when I replayed every moment of our marriage, wondering how long betrayal had been the third guest at our table. Grief came in waves, sometimes so violent it left me gasping. But with each crash, I surfaced stronger, my lungs fuller, my resolve harder. My daughter struggled the most. At 16, betrayal by a father feels like the ground cracking beneath your feet. She asked questions I couldn't always answer: why he chose her, why we weren't enough, why he laughed at me while I was breaking. I told her the truth, that sometimes people choose selfishness, that their weakness has nothing to do with our worth, and that silence in the face of cruelty is its own betrayal. She nodded, but her eyes carried the weight of a girl forced to grow up too quickly. My son was younger, just 10, and his innocence softened the edges. He wanted bedtime stories, tickle fights, long explanations about why camels could survive deserts, but families sometimes couldn't. Because camels carry water, I told him once, tucking him in. And families carry love. But when someone pokes holes in the love, it leaks out. He frowned, thoughtful, then said, "But you don't let it leak, Mommy." In that moment, I realized revenge had already transformed into something larger. Not punishment, not even justice, but preservation, the fierce, unyielding duty to protect my children from believing cruelty was normal. One afternoon, I received an email from Sullivan and Pierce. They offered me a consultancy role, ironic, given how many times my husband had dismissed my law degree as wasted. They said my precision with evidence, my courage in exposing misconduct had not gone unnoticed. I sat at the kitchen counter, the kids' homework spread out before me, and laughed through tears. Life has a way of returning pieces you thought were gone forever. When word spread through our community, reactions split. Some whispered that I was ruthless, that I should have protected my husband for the children's sake. Others came quietly to me in grocery stores and parking lots and church pews and whispered, "Thank you for showing it's possible to leave." I realized then how many women lived in shadows, silenced by fear of scandal, of judgment, of loneliness. And I thought, maybe my story isn't just mine. Maybe it's a mirror someone else needs. My husband tried to return, of course. He showed up at the door one rainy evening, Suit wrinkled eyes, bloodshot, voice soft in a way I'd once fallen for. I miss us. I miss the kids. We can start over. For a second, I almost saw the man I married, the man who once stayed up all night helping me prepare for mock trials, who kissed my swollen ankles during pregnancy, who swore we'd be forever. But then I remembered the poolside photo, the Instagram caption, the way my daughter's voice cracked when she asked if her father ever truly loved her. I closed the door gently but firmly. Some doors once shut must remain shut to keep the future safe. And so life moved forward. Slowly then, all at once. I found myself smiling more, not because the pain had vanished, but because it no longer owned me. I watched my children grow resilient, carrying scars but also strength. I rediscovered myself not as a wife defined by a man's success, but as a woman who had walked through fire and emerged carrying her children in both arms. One evening months later, I lit a single candle on a cake the kids had baked. It wasn't my birthday, but my son insisted we celebrate Mommy's new life day. We laughed, we sang, we ate the lopsided cake with too much frosting, and I realized they were right. I had been reborn not into a life I planned, but into one I had claimed. The years after felt like a slow unfolding each season, peeling back another layer of the woman I thought I had lost. I poured myself into work not as a way to forget, but as a way to reclaim. At Sullivan and Pierce, my consultancy grew into a permanent position. The first time I walked into the boardroom as an advisor, not as someone's wife waiting in the lobby, I felt a hush inside me. The same marble floors that once echoed his footsteps now carried mine, and they rang with a steadiness I hadn't heard in years. Colleagues shook my hand with respect that was mine alone, not borrowed, not gifted, not dependent on his last name. At home, the rhythm of our little family found a new beat. My daughter, who once resented me for tearing down the illusions of her father, began to lean on me in quiet ways. She'd bring her homework to the kitchen table, asking questions she could answer herself just to sit beside me. She started calling me her safe place. My son, with his unshaken loyalty, would slip notes into my work bag. Little crayon drawings of us holding hands under the words, "Me plus Mom equals strong." I pinned them to the refrigerator as daily reminders that healing isn't grand, it's stitched from moments like these. And yet the ghost of him lingered. I saw it when my daughter hesitated to trust boys at her school, when my son asked why promises break. I saw it in my own reflection in the faint crease between my brows that betrayal had carved. Trauma does not vanish, it teaches. And what it taught me was this: love without respect is just decoration, a frame with no picture inside. One day, almost 2 years after Dubai, a letter arrived. His handwriting on the envelope jagged and hurried. Inside, apologies sprawled across the page. Regret for leaving me on my birthday. Shame for the affair. Sorrow for the family he lost. He wrote of nights spent drinking, of jobs that slipped through his fingers, of loneliness he could not escape. He begged for forgiveness, not reunion, just the absolution of knowing I didn't hate him. I read it 3 times the way one reads an obituary, with distance, with disbelief, with an ache that cannot quite find its place. Then I folded it, slid it into a drawer, and whispered to myself, I forgive you, but not for you, for me. Because carrying hate is just another way of keeping someone alive inside you. I wanted him gone, not as a man, but as a shadow. The true climax of my story was not in the courtroom, nor in the scandal that toppled him, nor in the door I closed against his rain-soaked plea. It was in the quiet victories, my daughter's laughter returning like spring, my son sleeping soundly without nightmares, me walking into each day without wondering if I was enough. On my 43rd birthday, 3 candles lit the cake, one for survival, one for freedom, one for hope. The kids insisted each represented a piece of me rebuilt, stronger than before. As I blew them out, I realized I no longer feared the silence after the flame. I was the flame. If you are listening to this, maybe you too have been erased, doubted, betrayed, or left behind. Maybe you know the sting of laughter that cuts deeper than any knife, the hollow of a door closing on love you thought was forever. Hear me, you can rise. You can build a life that is yours, unborrowed, unbroken, unashamed. Revenge may feel sweet in the moment, but healing that quiet, steady fire that is the real victory. So if my story has touched you, if you found a piece of yourself in my pain and my fight, I ask you to share it. Let it reach someone who needs to hear that broken does not mean finished. Like, subscribe. Leave your story in the comments. I will read them, I will hold them with you. Together, we remind the world no betrayal is greater than the strength of a woman who chooses herself.